Welcome back to the Open Forum. Thank you so much for staying with us. If you're just joining us, I am Azara Lavia. Now, for many people, a substance addiction was an intruder that encroached onto every aspect of their lives. Those who have successfully recovered from an addiction worked hard to understand what led them to substance abuse and how they could keep the addiction from invading their lives again. Richie Richards, he has successfully overcome that hurdle and have written a book called Reform. And he mentioned when he started writing his story 8 years ago with the hope that it could impact others positively. He got some negative feedback and so on about the book he's wrote, noting that it is, it won't be a good book, etc. All the negative things you can talk about, but he is here and he's here to share with us his story with hopes of helping others in a positive way. Good afternoon, Richie.
Good afternoon.
Thank you so much for coming on the show.
No problem.
Okay, but before we get into the book, let us talk about who Richie is.
Well, I'm an Antiguan. I'm a 34-year-old male. I grew up in the village of Grace Farm. And my story really is that I began using drugs at age 14. And then I dropped out of high school and became a full-blown drug addict living on the street. I stole to support my habit. I got stabbed, shot at, arrested more times than I can remember. I've been admitted into 4 treatment centers for the treatment of drug and alcohol addiction. And it was at age 25 when I finally embraced change. And at that time, I made the discovery that my life's purpose was to use the perspective I gained from tragedy to illuminate life for myself and others who are going through the same path that I went. After I got sober, I went back to school and I got my diploma in addiction counseling. I was then hired as a milieu technician at Crossroads Center, the rehabilitation center on Island. When I first went to Crossroads Center, I went there to receive help. But this time I was going there to give help, and that is something amazing to me. I started doing my bachelor's degree 3 years ago in psychology, and I am presently in my final year. I have written 4 books about the topic of addiction. I have around 4 other books listed on Amazon, but 4 about the topic of addiction and recovery. And so one of my books that I published in 2017, that book, a lot of people came to Antigua and, liked the book and took the book overseas, and now it is being used in US and UK treatment centers to facilitate various reform groups. It's being used in prisons as well overseas.
That's amazing.
Yes, and when I've had the opportunity since I've gotten sober to travel to a lot of different countries, I've traveled throughout Europe. I've been to Paris, France. I've been to Rome, Italy. I have traveled to the US. I've traveled to Central America. And each place that I travel to, I get the opportunity to visit rehab centers and prisons and share my story with people. And so that is why I feel like I needed to write, because I feel like I have something to share, because not many people go through addiction and make it out, and it would take someone who has been there in order to understand what a person who is in it is going through. So I felt like I had a responsibility to share, because I was given these life experiences and I feel like I was given them for a reason.
Richie, let us talk about something that you mentioned. You said you began using drugs at the age of 14. Was it introduced to you by an elder or your peer, someone within your peer group?
I wouldn't really say that it was introduced to me. I saw people, I was exposed to it a little bit. Nobody gave it to me. I wanted to try it. So I wanted to experiment and adventure, and I guess it's that youthful phase of invincibility where you feel like you can do anything, nothing
Yes.
can't happen to you, and the call to adventure. So it was my own curiosity.
And at age 25, you got that wake up call. Was it a particular experience you had that said, no, this is the last straw, I'm done with this?
I know it wasn't one particular experience, but
Many
it was a
experience.
series of
Okay.
experiences. And basically, what happened is that I realized that I was not the person who my mom and my dad grew
Yes.
me up to be. I realized that I had strayed far from that path and had become a different person, and realized that I cannot continue going down this path anymore. But from the moment that I realized that I cannot continue going down this path anymore, it wasn't just easy to stop. That was where the fight began, because that was when I realized that I was dealing with something that is more powerful than I am. And so, as I said, I went to treatment 4 times in total before I could actually stop. So it's something very difficult. It's not something that you can just wake up one day and say, "Hey, I'm done with it." It's powerful.
Wow. I am so amazed and I'm so happy you're here to share your story because for individuals who are going through this situation at hand, because and you're studying psychology and you're sort of a counselor as well to many, there's certain phrases that you want to be careful not to label and stigmatize individuals battling substance abuse issues. Now, the great rapper DMX, it has been said he died, from drug overdose, and that is not confirmed. But in a lot of his interviews, he speaks openly about it, and he did mention that it was introduced to him. We see him battling it physically through his interviews and, sort of twitching and that sort of stuff. So when you mention that it is powerful, it's something bigger than you, is it something that you have to kneel earnestly in prayer and say, Lord, take it away?
Definitely, most definitely. Because in order to overcome something more powerful than you,
Yes.
you cannot do it yourself. So you must have a power
Invite.
greater than yourself and also greater than the drug.
Yes.
And so definitely it's only by submitting to a power greater than yourself and a power greater than the drug that you can overcome any addiction.
Wow.
And so whether that power, that's a higher power of your choice. Whether you choose to call that higher power God or whatever you choose to call that higher power. For me, that started as just trusting the people around me. So the people I found my higher power through the people in rehabs that I went to, the other recovering addicts who had made it out of their addiction. And that eventually led me to find my higher power, which I call God.
Amen.
Yes.
Amen. Richie, now we're talking about how powerful this drug addiction is, and sometimes people we don't necessarily know the differences in the drugs, and I myself don't know. But can you share with us the types of drugs and how addicting it can be, how hard it is to pull back? I read a particular part in the book Reformed that if you ever notice someone, an alcoholic, when you go to the bars, and I can speak, when I go out, I'm a social drinker. I can drink and leave the drink there, and it will become diluted with what? It will water down. So, because I am engaging in a nice conversation. But I have seen individuals fix me the next one and drink that real quick. And another one and another one, and then when you look, you have that one drink there, and the other individual have gone through 10 drinks in a space of, I don't know, minutes. What is it they're feeling, and what is it they're trying to suppress? Why they have to drink it so quickly? Drinks after drinks, shots after shots.
Well, let me try to break it down for you
Yes,
and give
please.
you the scientific
Yes,
explanation.
that's what I'm looking for.
Because that would be easier to understand. Well, first of all, addiction, a lot of people view addiction as a problem. Addiction for the user is not a problem. Addiction is a solution to the problem.
Say that again.
Addiction for the user is not a problem. Addiction is a solution to the problem. And so what you find is that people who are looking on from the outside, they would see all of the bad things that drugs are doing to the addict, but they wouldn't see what it's doing for the addict, right? And only the addict can know what it is doing for them. And it's something that works to fix the problem, because if it didn't work, they wouldn't have been doing it in the first place. So what happens with addiction is that a lot of people might see and say, okay, well, why can't he just stop? Just like you just explained with the situation, going out and you're able to have one or two drinks while
One
somebody
diluted drink.
right. Somebody might look on and say, well, why can't the addict just stop? Why can't he control his drinking or his using like other people can do? And it's a very complex situation, because the addict does not just make the choice to go out and have a drink. The power of choice is actually gone. So what I usually use to try to help people to understand what addiction is and how it manifests itself is a little clip from this film called Pleasure Unwoven. And what happens in this clip is that an alcoholic walks up to a bar and he's drinking, and somebody comes and puts a gun to the alcoholic's head and says, if you take that next drink, I will shoot you. Now, in that scenario, what happens in the mind of an addict / alcoholic is much different than what would happen in the mind of a normal social drinker. What happens in the mind of the alcoholic kind of sounds like, I wonder if I can get this drink down before the gun goes off. And as bizarre as that may sound, that is the element of craving that is present in an alcoholic that is not present in the mind of a normal user. So that's why addiction / alcoholism is a disease. It's a disease of the mind. What actually happens is that the chemical, the drug releases a chemical called dopamine in your brain, and that dopamine, that chemical, is responsible for an individual feeling happy. And so what happens is that it bypasses the frontal lobes, which are responsible for logical decision making.
Yes.
And it goes straight to the midbrain, which is responsible for survival. The brain recognizes things like water, food, shelter, and breathing as the top things for survival in a human being. And what happens is that the drug takes over the number one spot. So for the addict, not using is like not breathing.
And that number one spot comes from the frontal lobe.
That comes from the midbrain.
The midbrain.
Yes.
And the midbrain is the activity that's for survival.
Survival.
Okay.
Right.
Okay, you got that.
Yeah.
Right. So now we're saying that the dopamine that makes you happy always has to be fulfilled within the drug, the addict.
Yes.
himself.
And what happens?
But
as
before I
well-
say that, is addict the correct term? Is I don't want to be insensitive. So
Well, that's
what is the appropriate term when we are discussing?
that addict is the appropriate term to use for an addict. In recovery, a person in recovery, I would like to introduce myself as a person in long-term recovery. So, meanwhile, a lot of people would still say I'm an addict, but I would like to say I'm in long-term recovery.
All right. Okay.
Right.
What does the term relapse mean? For those who don't know.
Relapse basically means returning to your drug of choice after an attempt to stop using it. So that's like trying to stop, but then it takes a hold of you again and you continue to use again.
Right. So we're on the topic of relapsing and you're continuing to use again. What are the challenges and the struggles associated with relapsing? And what is it you're trying to accomplish when you're in that relapse state?
Well, basically, the way addiction manifests is that people who are addicts don't have a problem with using drugs. People who are addicts has a problem with living life on life's terms. When somebody is at a bar or, going to buy drugs from a drug dealer, they're not there saying, I have a problem with using drugs. What the problem is that I cannot live life on life's terms, so I need to escape.
Wow.
So relapse is when you have been doing something and each encounter that a person has, each habit that a person practices, it gets hardwired into your brain. And so when a person decides to come off of a substance, all that memory is still there. So as I always say, it's like you cannot, if you have put on your right shoe first for 15 years every day, you cannot just wake up one day and say, I'm going to start putting on this left shoe first every day. Some days you're going to still wake up and put on that right shoe first because it's a habit that has been ingrained within you.
Yes.
So it's a struggle to actually stop that habit. So basically a relapse is just a return to a normal practiced habit that the individual has been doing for a long period of time, and it's something that's not easy to break away from, but with enough practice. And everybody doesn't relapse. Everybody does not relapse. It happens with some people, but it's not a roadblock. It's a learning experience.
Okay.
And once a person relapses, they can learn what happened, that, okay, why did I relapse? And they can come back and they will do it better next time.
Yes. Richie, I want to ask a question because I have noticed in certain individuals, and maybe people I've associated with, certain signs that maybe because I am not a health practitioner or even someone within this field, I would not know. But this sort of twitching and the itching and the sniffing and this irritable tantrum behavior, what really happens why individual resort to acting in this manner?
Well, just as any type of substances a person put into their body, there are certain side effects. Even with legal pharmaceutical drugs, there are certain side effects that happen, and that's just a person physiological makeup responding to the chemicals in the drug.
Okay.
And there are a lot of different responses. A lot of the worst responses, though, comes not when the individual is using the drug, but when the individual tries to stop using the drug. They are what they call withdrawal symptoms. And so that's why it's difficult as well to stop using drugs, because it's not just a psychological thing, it's actually a physiological thing as well. Your body actually gets physically dependent on these substances. And so a lot of people would have what you call tremors. That happens especially with alcohol, trying to come off of alcohol. There would be depression, there would be anxiety, there would be twitching, as you just mentioned. There would be pain, and different drugs has different side effects. Especially with heroin, there's a lot of pain associated with those opioids, and for some people it can even lead to death, depending on the amount of substance the person has been using, and if they don't get the proper care, the proper detox that they need, assisted by nurses and doctors and stuff like that.
Right. And are the drugs classified in a certain way? Differentiated, like you mentioned, heroin. What else are there? Crack, or that
Yes.
type of stuff. I don't know.
Yes, there are different types, classes of drugs. There are what we call uppers and downers. There are stimulants and depressants. There are opioids. Different classes of drug, and different drugs fit into those different classes. And basically what that means is that the classes mean that they have a different effect on the person. So for some people it stimulates them, for some people it puts them in a relaxing mood. There are even what you call hallucinogens, which basically takes you on a trip where you hallucinate and you see things that are not really present.
Wow. Okay, Richie. Powerful stuff there, and I'm so happy that you're here shedding light and telling your story. You're like an angel for individuals who are going through this particular problem. What advice do you have for youngsters who think it is cool, or it makes them look attractive and puts them in a certain bracket of cool, or just some, I don't know what it is in their mind? Because when I was growing up, I remember the DARE program and Sergeant Drew instilled in us at the age of 11 and 12, drugs are bad, they're not cool, and the sessions were so great. I wish I could see more of that, but maybe Richie, you can take up that mantle and head back on in the school. But what advice do you have for youngsters heading down that path?
What advice do I have? That's a tricky question, because it is very difficult to be able to stop someone who has already begun using drugs and are not facing any consequences, because basically the drug gives them a good feeling. They get they feel good about using, but it's not impossible. So I would say that, as I said before, using drugs is not a problem for the addict. It's a solution.
It's a solution.
And it's something that works, right? So what I would say in terms of prevention is that there can be other avenues to find a solution to whatever the problem is, because the problem can come in many different ways. It can come from the environment where an individual goes through trauma, right? And it can come from genetics. It can be that you have a long streak of alcoholics or addicts in your family, and the genes get
and the
passed
environment
down.
in which you are grown up in as well.
Right, and all of that. But what essentially what happens is that there is depletion of neurotransmitters, like dopamine that I just mentioned. Dopamine is one neurotransmitter. There's serotonin and all of these other things that's in your body, natural chemicals
Serotonin,
in your
the
body.
feel good.
Yes. So all of these natural chemicals in your body, what essentially happens, it can be caused by trauma, genetics, whatever. And what essentially happens is that there's a depletion in those hormones and neurotransmitters. And what happens is that an individual can, when that happens, individual can feel depressed or anxious, or just feel like, the world looks crappy, the world doesn't look good, I don't fit in. And all of these things can be prerequisites for addiction, right? It can be the problem that caused the individual to, once exposed to experimenting with different things, the individual finds something that works to fix that problem, right? And so what I would suggest in terms of prevention is for people, because we are social beings, is for people to have different types of social activities that they can attend, for people to have people that they feel like they can trust and talk to, for people to speak to counselors more about these problems that occur in teens, adjustment disorder, depression, and all of these stuff, so that people can learn how to deal with these problems. Because we get a lot of schooling about logical things and how to go about logic, but we do not get a lot of education about our emotional selves and how to deal with emotions, how to balance our emotions, especially for men who are being taught to not express their emotions, because if they express their emotions, they might seem soft or they might
Yes.
seem girlish or whatever. And so a lot of men,
lot of
especially,
stigma associated
yes, a
with
lot
that.
of men especially do not know how to deal with emotional wounds and stuff. So basically, they keep it inside. And so, and it's a need that needs to be met.
A void
And,
that needs to be filled up.
right. And so if when a person cannot get a need met in a healthy way, they find a back door. They find an unhealthy way to meet that need. Right? And so that's why a lot of people resort to using drugs, because it works. It fixes the problem.
Right.
And so in terms of prevention, I would say that there needs to be a little bit more education about dealing with emotional
And
stuff.
that's where you come in, Richie.
Yes, and I mostly specialize in when people have already started using the drug and have found that they don't want to use it anymore. They want to stop. That's mostly my specialty.
Okay.
But I can speak from my experience of having gone through drug addiction myself, that that the drug is not really the problem. The drug was a solution to a problem, and that there can be other ways in which that can provide a solution to people, instead of healthy solutions, instead of the unhealthy ones. So I mentioned things like clubs, sport clubs, social activities, having somebody who you can speak to, having somebody, especially for younger people, having like a person in authority who you can tell certain things, because a lot of people go through so much things that we won't even know of. A lot of people go through abuse. A lot of people go through different forms of abuse. So and how do they deal with those situations, and so that's why there needs to be different avenues for people to get help with emotional problems.
Stay with us. We'll be right back with more.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh, yeah. If you give a little more than you take, and if you try to fix more than you break, if you're the kind who takes the time to help a stranger in the rain, there's a place for people like you. If you stand up for those down on their knees and lend a voice to those who cannot speak, if you shine a little light.
Welcome back to the Open Forum, and thank you so much for staying with us. I'm speaking to a recovering addict, Richie Richards, who has been sober for 9 years, and he is just here telling us his story and encouraging individuals who may be running down that lane, or who is in that said situation, the best way out, and some ideas and so on, encouragement. Now, Richie, you have written the book called Reform. How long did it take to write this book, and what are some of the challenges you encountered when you wrote the book?
Well, it took me 8 years in total to write the entire book. A lot of that time was on and off, and a lot of that time was not scheduled time, but when I would get an inspiration, sometimes I'll be even driving and I'd have to pull to the side of the road and open the note section in my phone and start
Wow.
writing, because I would get something
Yes.
that I don't want to lose, at that particular time. And so that was the creative process, and I actually started writing the last chapter first, which is not something
The
that
last chapter first?
yes, which is not something that is recommended to do. Um, but that's where I found like the inspiration, because the story is a story of redemption, right? And so in stories of redemption, what you would find is the hard parts first, and then the part that's filled with hope afterwards, you know. So that's where I started, and then continued to go back and finish right the first. But a lot of what I faced was that after writing for so much years, what happens is that I kind of became blind to a lot of the things that were in the book, because I just kept seeing it over and over and over again. And so what I had to do is that I had to get people, editors, and better readers to look at it for me and criticize it for me, and tell me, you know, what needs to improve, what needs to change, and
Wow.
all of that. And so because they hadn't seen it before, they had fresh eyes looking at it. And so a lot of their fresh eyes is what gave me the inspiration to change it and shape it, and all of that.
Fashion it and mold it.
Yes.
Now, what has the response been like since the launch of the book? You said you have written several, but Reform seems to be the bestseller, the number one hit maker.
Yes, the response has been great. It has been covered on news stations internationally.
Wow.
A lot of the people who got it first to read, two people told me that it should be turned into a movie. This was a journalist and another person. One therapist got it to read, and she said that she would keep it. She would keep a copy to help with her
Her
clients,
yes.
especially when she has teen clients or anybody with coming in with substance
Wow.
abuse. She's gonna keep it and use it to help them. So the responses have been really good so far. A lot of people on social media, you know, has been sharing it and all of that. The responses has been good.
Nice, nice. And you said for individuals who are they hard copies in any of the bookstores here, or they have to go strictly on Amazon online to get it?
Well, it's only on Amazon for now. It's available in Kindle and print version on Amazon for now. It will be in bookstores in Antigua soon, but the shipping, a lot of the shipping companies are slowed up because of the pandemic and
COVID,
all
yes.
of that. So they are on their way.
On their way.
Can't say exactly
So,
when,
Richie, we
but
have to do a grand launch of this book, because when I reached out to you on Facebook, and well, I saw the post you made, you know, just detailing the book, Reform, and what it's really about. It's a story of redemption, basically. And like you mentioned, the response has been great from Facebook friends and family. So that really shut down all the naysayers in the beginning that said it's egotistical to write a book about your story yourself without seeing the positive aspect of you writing the book. So I'm really happy to see that it has blossomed into the state it is, and I'm sure people are downloading as we speak.
Yes,
The
and
book.
I think with anything, with any achievement that you want to go after, nobody's going to really believe in your dream as much as you do.
Right.
So a lot of the times you would hear people say, just don't tell anybody what you're doing, just do it. And as I like
Sorry to
believe-
cut you off, and there's a statement that goes like this: work in silence. Do you subscribe to that?
Yes, because there, especially when people don't understand your drive, there can be a lot of negative remarks, because your part is not anybody's part, and they're only going to give you feedback based on their experiences and their path. As I like to say, is that he who has a why, I think this was Friedrich Nietzsche, the philosopher, he said, he who has a why can conquer anyhow. You know, as long as you know why
Why.
you're doing what you're doing, the how is the easy part, you know.
But you have to know the why first.
Yes.
To know the how.
Yes.
Okay, brilliant. Let's talk about, we talk about the book. What are some of the favorite chapters in the book that, really stood out to you? And, in you writing, you mentioned that, sometimes when you're driving, you pull off, you jot down your notes, etc., etc. But what is the favorite chapter for you?
That's a hard question because the whole book, I love the whole book. Well, it starts off with a prologue. And the reason for the prologue is to kind of give you a taste of what's coming in the story,
Yes.
of what the story really is about. And there's a part in the prologue where I spoke about my experience of the first time I wanted to stop using substances.
Can you just share a little bit with us on
Yes,
that?
definitely. And so what happened was that there was one morning I was inside of a drug house, and I was
Wow.
I wasn't groomed, I wasn't keeping my hygiene, I didn't sleep for a number of days, I was just using over and over. And it became a point where I say, I just cannot continue living like this anymore. And so for the first time, I made the decision and say, you know what, I'm done with this. I'm never ever going to go back and use it again. So I left the drug house, threw away my pipe, threw away everything associated with drug use, and I went home. And a few hours after, I got some sleep, and a few hours after, I woke up, and the only thing that I could think about was to use another drug. So I walked out
Wow.
of that house without a thought, without a fight, without any remorse, and went straight back for my pipe where I had thrown it, and went straight back to that same drug house, which just a few hours ago I said that I would never ever go back to.
Sorry, Richie. So is it that like when in the movies, when we witness people, addicts, they're craving whatever it is, whatever drug, because you said the different classifications of drugs. When you see them scrabbling in the garbage or the trash, or they're fighting and they're begging for mercy, please, I need it, I need it. What is that?
That is the element of craving that the person needs to have it right now, as I mentioned before.
And if not?
And if not, you just feel like you're gonna die. So as I mentioned before, it's just like it takes over the top spot for survival in the brain, and so it's like breathing. It's the
Oxygen.
same, right? So how would you feel if you don't take a breath? If you try to stop breathing, it's almost like you're gonna die, right? So you have to have that breath. So it's kind of like the same thing.
Yes. Okay, so let's go back to the experience now.
Yes. So in that experience that I just spoke about, meanwhile, I was heading home and saying that I'm done with this. I'm never ever going to use this again. If you had hooked me up to a polygraph test, if you had put a lie detector test on me, the lie detector test would have said that I was telling the truth, because I meant every word of what I was saying. I was done. I didn't want this anymore. But I still woke up and went back to that same drug. And that is the power, because none of my logical decisions could have overpowered the need for that drug. And that part in the book is like, it's like a highlight, and it's not only a highlight in the book, it was a highlight in my life and in my experiences, because that was the first time that I ever recognized that I am dealing with something more powerful than I am. Because before, when people used to say, oh, you need to stop doing that stuff or whatever, in my mind I'm saying I can stop when I want to, because as I said before, again, that youthful feeling of invincibility, like,
Yes.
I can, I'm smart enough for everything else, I can
I'm in
handle
control
this.
of
I'm
me.
in control. But that was the first time that I experienced not being in control.
And what age was that?
That was around age 20, maybe around age 20. Yes.
I am just stunned, and I am really inspired by your story, and we have to get this word out. So my lovely friend here, Shannon, is recording this, so we're going to be sharing this on social media.
And another part in the book that I really like, well, as I say, I like the whole book, but I really like the ending of the book because it's a story of redemption, and at the ending, that's where you find hope. But there's another part in the book where I spoke about one day I was walking into a bank, and I just heard this voice behind me saying, hi Richie, how are you? I'm longing to see you. And this woman just came and hugged me and said, I'm so proud of you. I'm so proud of how you changed your life and all of that. And I recognized that woman to be one of my using friend's mother. She was the mom of a person that I used to use drugs with. And so she's telling me, I'm so glad that, you changed your life around, and I'm so proud of you or whatever. And in the end, she told me that, my son is still using drugs or whatever. I really need you to speak to him for me, and I collected her phone number or whatever. I went and looked for her son, which was my friend, and I spoke with him. And he admitted that, you know what, I have a problem and I need help. And I referred him to Crossroads Center.
And how is he now?
And I haven't seen him for a while, but he was doing good.
Amen.
He was doing good. And things like that are what drives me today, because why I want to write my story, because I have the necessary experience that I can help somebody else going through that situation. So that was another highlight. There are many highlights, but that was just one.
And we'd need more time to highlight the book. But Richie, I want to thank you so much for coming and sharing your story and being an inspiration to others. God is really using you in a positive way, just like you said in your book. This is not for fame, this is not for money or gain, financial gain, but just to be example, a role model to others. And I think you did a wonderful job in putting the book together. So I know you want to credit individuals who may have assisted you in writing the book.
I hope I remember everybody.
Well, if you can't call names, then
my editors.
You'll get in trouble.
My editors. There was Roseanne Yulman. She helped me a lot with editing. There was this guy called Mike Stoner. He's the author of a book called Jalan Jalan. There was Annie Dillon at KN Literary Arts. There was one local person. Her name is Taryn St. Louis. She's an excellent writer. She helped me, to put in a lot of imagery into the book as well. There was Martina Johnson. Her as well. She helped me a lot. I think she used to live in Antigua for a while. She used to do journalism in Antigua. And she's now living in Guyana. She has helped me a lot. When I reached out to her first, she told me that, to give her some time because she's working on her master's. I thought, okay, because I reached out to a few people who never got back to me before, so I thought that, okay, she's just another one of these people that's not going to get back to me. But she did keep up to her word, and soon as she was done,
a woman of her word.
Yes, she got back to me, and she helped me a lot with the editing. So the book went through quite a few rounds of editing, different types of editing, developmental editing, structural line editing, just basic. It went through 2 rounds of basic editing for checking for grammar and misspelled words and all of that. So those were the people who really, contributed to the physical creation of the book.
And I really love the artistic work. I love the front cover. It just looks powerful. So whoever was behind of that did a fantastic job. Any final words?
Final words. Well, I'd just like to say, to anyone who feels that they know someone, or even if you yourself are struggling with addiction, you can always reach out to me. My name is Richie Landon Richards on Facebook. You can always try to find me, reach out to me, and I can speak with you and refer you to the necessary help that you would need. And I'm always open for that. That's something that gives me joy. So if you know someone struggling with an addiction, don't be afraid to reach out.
Right. Thank you so much, Richie. All the very best with your studies. You're in the final year, and I know you'll be doing positive things here in Antigua and Barbuda and even across the globe, because like you said, people have encouraged you to do a movie with the books. So that will be a big thing, but I'm sure it can happen.
Yes.
And so thank you once again. And with that, we have come to the end of the Open Forum. I've been your host, Azara Lavia. God bless, take care, and be safe.
And I